The year 2020 foresaw Ukraine's military in a defensive position, losing territory to Russian forces in both Kharkiv in the northeast and Donetsk province in the east. In Kharkiv, Ukraine's second-largest city, Russia launched a surprise offensive in May, forcing Ukrainian forces to stretch thin in their defense. Ukrainian soldiers struggled to maintain their current defensive lines. Moscow gained control of Avdiivka city in Donetsk in February, and the fall of this stronghold marked the beginning of Russian offensives across the region. Exploiting Kyiv's ineffective troop rotations, Russian forces launched an assault toward Donetsk and New York, two towns in Donetsk that had previously seen little combat. Chasiv Yar, a stronghold linked to another critical city in Donetsk, Pokrovsk, via the TO-504 highway, also fell. This collapse continued to Vuhledar in October as a stepping stone for Russia to advance gradually toward Kharkiv and Pokrovsk. The Kharkiv axis in the south became a key staging ground for Russia to prepare for the battle for Pokrovsk, where Russian forces are attacking from three directions. The Russians often aim to push Kyiv into a semi-encirclement, allowing them to control specific territories, while causing significant logistical challenges for Ukrainian forces. The villages of Zelenovka and Sukhyely, near Kharkiv, have fallen into Russian hands. The situation around Velika Novosilka, a town 55 kilometers south of Pokrovsk, is deteriorating. Kyiv has lost all supply and evacuation routes. If Russia advances from the village of Staromayorsk in the south and Rivnopol in the southwest, they could isolate the town almost entirely. Velika Novosilka is Russia's primary target in the south after capturing Vuhledar. Toward the Kursk direction, Russia broke through Ukraine's defensive line north of Novoivanovka, removing a key stronghold and advancing toward Malaya Lokia. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense, their forces continue to inflict heavy casualties on 13 Ukrainian brigades in this area. In last weekend's offensive operations, Russia reportedly defeated 5 mechanized brigades, 3 airborne assault brigades, 1 marine brigade, and 4 territorial defense brigades of Ukraine at various locations in the Kursk region. As 2020 nears its end, Ukraine faces a severe manpower shortage. The Guardian wrote, "Similar scenes now play out frequently in Ukraine, where the depleted and exhausted army is increasingly made up of older men. As the country approaches 3 years of full-scale war with Russia and waits uneasily for the arrival of Donald Trump in the White House, an acute personnel shortage at the front presents a dilemma." A series of interviews conducted by the newspaper with Ukrainian officers painted a grim picture of Kyiv's war effort, where recruits consist mainly of the elderly, the infirm, or alcoholics, many of whom can barely hold a weapon to fight. Some sources within Ukraine's air defense units told The Guardian that the troop shortage at the front had become so severe that the Ukrainian General Staff had ordered their already depleted air defense units to deploy their personnel as infantry on the front lines. The candid revelations by British media highlight that Kyiv's government may struggle to prolong its fighting and is predicted to face setbacks in some critical battles, notably at Pokrovsk. The Ukrainian General Staff's decision to redeploy air defense troops as infantry underscores a fundamental difference from the Russian General Staff. Throughout 3 years of conflict, Russia has never conducted a military campaign to achieve purely political objectives. This marks a second fundamental difference between Russia and Ukraine's military command and control systems. It is worth noting that Kyiv once hoped the chief of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces, General Valery Gerasimov, would withdraw troops from the Pokrovsk direction to stabilize Kursk as Ukraine attacked the region. However, he did not do so and continued to move forces as planned in Donetsk, despite allowing Kyiv to invade Russia's border territories, which was a blow to the Kremlin's prestige. In Ukraine, everything operates differently. Military operations are driven by political purposes, as evidenced by Kyiv deploying elite marine brigades to capture the Kharkiv bridgehead or initiating the Kursk campaign to gain negotiation leverage amid dire conditions on the main Donbas front. Moreover, Russia and Ukraine also differ in the quality of their intelligence systems. Kyiv and NATO allies have a wide range of intelligence assets, from satellites to a network of intelligence services, which work much better than the Russians. This allows them to conduct surprise operations strategically, such as in Kursk and Kharkiv. In contrast, the Russians succeeded by concentrating their forces and resources, applying constant pressure on their chosen direction, and breaking down one stronghold after another of the enemy. As a result, the Russians forced the Ukrainian general staff to move combat units from many areas to the location where Russia was attacking, and the Ukrainian army began to show signs of collapse in the places left empty. This allowed the enemy to take advantage of the time during the troop movements and strike directly into the area lacking forces. Therefore, this is a dispersive pressure tactic that the Russians are intensifying across the entire front. This is a difficult phase for President Zelensky, especially when Trump publicly increased pressure, forcing him to consider a ceasefire and give up lost territories. He also has to participate in negotiations through people authorized by Trump in Europe. A prominent example is Prime Minister Orban of Hungary. Prime Minister Orban recently stated that the war in Ukraine would end in 2025 and said, either the war will end with peace negotiations, or one of the warring sides will be annihilated. He also noted that in 2025, instead of politics of war, politics of peace will return, and we will again achieve great economic success. With this statement from the Hungarian Prime Minister, we can see the decision of the Trump administration to end military conflict and focus on economic warfare, with predictions of intense trade wars targeting China, the EU, Canada, and Mexico. Trump wins the election, European right-wing rises to power, threatening to overthrow the global elite system. Fatigue from the war in Ukraine, along with economic difficulties and concerns about immigration, has sparked a wave of revolt across Europe. In 2024, elections throughout the continent partly reflect the weakening trust in society, questioning whether NATO can win against Russia in the war in Ukraine. While continuing to support Ukraine in general, a portion of the European population is increasingly inclined to accept resolving the conflict through peace negotiations. Trump's victory, aiming to end the Ukraine conflict, shattered the hopes of those who believed Europe could bear the entire war cost in Ukraine. The opposition from right-wing parties demonstrates this, even more serious, when the center-left faction in Europe also opposes the war. The 2024 elections seem to challenge the consensus on Ukraine's anti-Russia goals and its NATO membership. The French parliamentary election in June saw the rise of the right wing, while in Germany, the September elections in 3 eastern states marked a historic breakthrough when a far-right party won first place in a state election. Billionaire Elon Musk recently dealt a heavy blow to Germany's democratic order when he commented, "Only the AfD right-wing party can save Germany." What is concerning is that the ruling party coalition of Chancellor Scholz and most EU leaders are boycotting the AfD and considering it an extremist party, due to its opposition to German aid for Ukraine and its labeling as a supporter of Putin. The German election on February 23 next year may create a center-right and center-left coalition, both of which oppose continuing to provide weapons to Ukraine. Meanwhile, in Central and Eastern European countries, election results also favor candidates or parties opposed to the war in Ukraine. In Georgia and Romania, foreign policy positions that avoid open conflict with Russia are gaining ground. However, this is currently opposed by the left-wing opposition, which accuses Russia of pulling the strings. The mainstream parties in Austria are also working to form a ruling coalition to defeat the Freedom Party FPO, which won the election in September. Notably, FPO leader Herbert Kickl has campaigned against supporting Ukraine. 2 other populist right-wing countries in Europe, Hungary's Prime Minister Orban and Slovakia's Prime Minister Fico, are openly against aid to Ukraine. Most recently, Slovak President Peter Pellegrini called for immediate peace negotiations to end the war. He argued that Ukraine needs to make territorial concessions to achieve a solution. "I think you have to be realistic about peace. Today, probably no one in Europe believes peace would be possible without Ukraine's territorial losses." President Pellegrini's view aligns with the policy of Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico, a close ally, who has taken a critical approach to military aid to Ukraine and opposed sanctions against Russia. Since taking office in September, Fico has halted military support for Ukraine and accepted an invitation to attend Moscow's Victory Day celebrations next May, signaling a significant shift in Slovakia's foreign policy direction. Rising inflation, slow economic growth, and unemployment have made European voters uneasy and dissatisfied. Furthermore, Europe is in the crosshairs of Donald Trump with new tariff sanctions, which will exacerbate the economic downturn and could challenge some EU members' commitment to continuing support for Ukraine. A divided EU will damage its ability to counter any challenges from Russia after the war in Ukraine. France and Germany, 2 key European countries, are facing severe economic and political crises. The combined GDP of these two nations accounts for nearly 40% of the US total GDP, and they are the two most significant contributors to the EU budget. This harsh reality partly limits the efforts of Poland, the Nordic countries, and the Baltic states to form a bloc to replace Europe's leadership. However, Poland is set to replace Hungary as the rotating EU president in January, and the country is expected to play a prominent role in diplomatic efforts to end the war in Ukraine. It is important to note that the Polish government is highly supportive of NATO's proxy war against Russia, and this country plays a more important role than any other NATO member in logistical support for the conflict. However, Poland's opinion seems less enthusiastic about supporting Ukraine. The Public Opinion Research Center CBOS released results in November showing that 55% of Poles believe it would be best to end the war and restore peace, even if Ukraine has to give up part of its territory or independence. This is a significant increase compared to 39% of people holding this view 2 months earlier. This result is believed to stem from Trump's victory and Ukraine's recent losses. This survey data is essential as it demonstrates that the Polish public no longer believes Ukraine can achieve its maximum goals. Additionally, the economy plays a significant role in shaping public opinion in Poland. The influx of Ukrainian agricultural products has angered Polish farmers, leading them to block the borders to protest the cheap Ukrainian grain destroying their domestic market. This has complicated the route for transporting Western weapons and equipment from Poland to Ukraine. These factors combined could lead the Polish government to decide against contributing troops to a post-conflict peacekeeping mission in Ukraine. It can be said that at the beginning of the conflict, Poland thought they could turn Ukraine into a subordinate partner and hoped to cause a strategic defeat for Russia along with NATO. However, both of these plans failed as the Kyiv government allied more with Germany than Poland. At the same time, the Russians stood firm after NATO's unprecedented proxy war and Western sanctions. All of this has led Poland to reassess its plans.